Hey everybody, I hope that you guys are doing well. I've had a few friends reach out to me and ask me, what are some good books to read about racial reconciliation and racial justice and things of that nature due to what's going on in our world at the moment. So I just want to share some that have been helpful to me on my journey, and they've been helpful for different reasons and in different ways. I am a native Memphian, and so I grew up on one side of the train tracks, and so I had to learn a lot of this stuff as I've grown up. And so you're hearing this from a perspective of a person who's had to learn this over time also. And these are just a few books that have been helpful for different reasons. And I'll tag them all in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube. And with that being said, I would like to ask you to like the video if it's helpful to you, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button, and also share this with a friend if you think this can be helpful to them. All right, so let's get into it. The first one is Oneness Embraced by Dr. Tony Evans. This book is really helpful with having as Dr. Evans calls it, a kingdom view of racial reconciliation. He does a good job of just staying kingdom focused and in many ways exegeting the call to racial reconciliation from the scriptures. And so it's a good expository book. It's actually a good one to start with. All of these books aren't necessarily good starter books, but if you're just getting into this conversation and you're trying to hear it from a Christian perspective, you want to see it exposited from the text and given evidence from the scriptures, I would highly recommend Oneness Embrace from Dr. Evans. He's very pastoral in this book and really guides the leader well. It's a good one to start with. Divided by Faith by Dr. Michael Emerson. And this one, he does a good job of chronicling history and taking you through America's relationship with race and in the American church's relationship with race. And in many ways shows how there are points in history where the church has given a stamp of approval from racism. And it also gives you a clear picture of how we landed where we are today, where 11 a.m. is still the most segregated hour of 11 a.m. on Sunday is still the most segregated hour of the week. And so he chronicles through American history and really does a good story of addressing evangelicalism's relationship with race. It's a good one to read if you're trying to understand the depth and the history of how we landed here. So I highly recommend that one. This is The Elusive Dream by Dr. Korie Edwards, and she does a lot of qualitative research by actually going inside of churches that are trying to be multi-ethnic and multicultural, and really does a good diagnosis from the inside out of how those churches how those churches are wrestling rather with the realities of racial reconciliation within a church. This is very real. She's telling you the good, the bad, and the ugly, the ups and the downs. So if you want a dose of realism with how this really looks in a real church context, it may scare you or challenge you when you figure out how difficult this actually is, but it's a helpful one for someone who's trying to really figure this out in a real church context. This one may shock you a little bit, but this is more of a missionary book, but it's been helpful to me. This is Ministering Cross-Culturally. And these are just tips for how to bridge culture in a ministry context in general. So this isn't necessarily talking about black church or white church, but it's talking about how do missionaries go into a context which is foreign to them and create a third culture and a shared culture. I like it because it just has a lot of good principles for how to build something cross-culturally and work through those barriers. And so if you're a ministry leader or someone trying to build something or steer something in a cross-cultural direction, recommend that. And that is by Sherwood, Lingenfelter. All right. So this is So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. And this is good for learning how to have the conversation, because there's sometimes some rules to this conversation. This conversation can be awkward. You might be saying, man, how do I begin to talk about this with anyone? And so this isn't necessarily a Christian book, but it is a good book for those who want to learn how to have the conversation, how to move through the awkwardness, and talk about race in a way that is constructive. I actually picked this up in Alabama at the Equal Justice Initiative, which is Bryan Stevenson's organization. If you're not familiar with him, he's the guy who the movie Just Mercy is about. So I picked this up at his place in Alabama, and this is really good. I recommend this for the person who's saying, I want to know how to have this conversation. So, all right, this, hey, know this guy. This is my book. This is We Want a Different Story, shameless plug, but my book is about the power of narrative, and particularly the power of narrative among African-American men, and how for so long we've been given a negative narrative about ourselves that before we were born, it was just kind of stamped on us, and we were expected to play a role in that story. And so I try to deconstruct that narrative, give you a timeline on how that narrative came to be, give you exposition from the Bible on how that narrative came to be and how it is still possible even into this day. But my hope is to give the reader some tools on how to begin rewriting that narrative. And that requires often a lot of unlearning of stories, myths, and tales that you've been told about African-American men, and for African-American men, for those stories that we've been told about ourselves. So definitely recommend that. What else we got here? I don't want to take your whole day. Wide Awake by Daniel Hill. Okay, now this will challenge you. It really deconstructs this concept of whiteness, and what it's meant by that is that whiteness and blackness were social constructs. Ethnicity is real, and so to be a European American or a person of Irish descent or Italian descent is ethnically and culturally true, but this concept of whiteness was something that was created, and I don't want to steal its thunder, but the concept of whiteness is something that was created to oppose other people groups and to create statuses within culture and to create separation within culture. And so before anybody was white or black, I would have been of, let's say, Nigerian descent, or you name it. I would have been from an African country in particular. I would have been from Ghana, right? And so one of my quote unquote white brothers and sisters would have been Irish or Italian. This concept of whiteness and blackness was created to create power structures, and he does a really good job at it. If you really want to go there, this is one of those challenging reads, particularly for my white brothers and sisters. You might even come out with a different word for that after reading this, and so I recommend it. This will challenge you. Let's see. Then The Color of Compromise. Dr. Jemar Tisby just does a good job of chronicling history, similar to Dr. Michael Emerson. And yeah, it really shows how at certain points in history, the church was complicit with racism. And this can be challenging as well, but I recommend it if you're ready to really embrace and go into history. And then Dr. Bryan Loritts, love him, went through his residency myself in Memphis at Fellowship Memphis, and he wrote this book, Letters to a Birmingham Jail. And this is just a series of letters from pastors who are writing back to Dr. King to the Birmingham jail. This is a very creative writing project by Bryan Loritts. I recommend anything by Bryan Loritts. And so I'll leave it there. I ain't trying to go into the 11-minute 10-minute world on this video, but yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll link these videos, I'll link these books in this video, and so you can find these books. But yeah, remember to, if this has been helpful to you, like the page, share the page, click the bell for notifications, and subscribe to the page. All right, you guys have a good day.